Today I'm going to show how I use my Bible highlighters to color code in my Bible. In my Bible, I use all of these different colored highlighters for something specific, and they do not match most of the time with the pen colors that I use in underlining and marking. So these highlighters are different, and in person you can see that they have a different texture than crayons or the pens, so it doesn't really get super confusing, but if that's a problem, then it would make more sense to color code them in connection with the other colors that you use. But here you can see I'm in Daniel, and I'm using, there's green here, and pink, and yellow. So anytime that a verse sticks out to me, or a phrase, really anything that doesn't have a category, I use yellow, just for a regular highlighting color yellow, just like you would a regular yellow. So that's what I use the yellow for. Nothing super specific, just anything that catches my attention and I want to be able to find later on. Green is something that I use, is the color that I use for descriptions. I find descriptions of people, of places very interesting, and it's fun to see how the Bible describes certain people. I was reading in 1 Samuel recently, and you can see all the different ways that Saul is described by David, and mainly by David, but you can also see how Abigail is described. Saul describes David as my son, and previously David refers to Saul as his father. And then also you can see sometimes how many times a specific phrase is used to describe somebody. So David calls Saul the Lord's anointed several times in this one passage. So it just makes it easier to see. I'm here in Acts to show how I use pink, because Acts is a great example for this color. I use a light pink for things that are repeated in the specific book, and then I use a darker pink to highlight phrases or events or things that happen that are repeated throughout the Bible. So, for example, give thanks. I use the dark pink because that's in Psalms, and it's also in Colossians, but it's also in Acts, so it's everywhere. I use that for repeated throughout the entire Bible. And then this lighter pink, which kind of looks orange on the camera, but this one is more pink. I use it to highlight repeated things throughout a specific book. So in Acts, one of the things that is a repeated phrase or idea is many people coming to the Lord. A large number of believers turn to the Lord. Another one is people were amazed when they see a miracle that happened when the disciples were working, or when the disciples were preaching. And they rejoice. So there's rejoicing, there's amazement. Those hearing him continue to be amazed. They turn to the Lord, and the hand of the Lord was with them. We looked at that one. They were rejoicing and glorifying the word of the Lord, and there were many who believed. They were filled with joy, and he was amazed, and the word of the Lord continued to grow and be multiplied, and they were amazed. And so you can just see a common thread all the way through the entire book, bringing great joy to the brethren and reporting all that God had done with them. Another phrase is becoming of one mind, or one accord, or in one spirit. So all of those phrases are also highlighted. I used a different brand, an old brand, so that's why these don't really match up. But theoretically, they would match up because I'd use the same brand. But I finally found a kind that don't bleed through. They don't bleed through, and they don't stick to the pages. So that's really nice. And then purple, you can see the purple. These are really, it's a little bit more subjective for purple, but things that I find that are just solid truth that just stands out to me, like cleansing their hearts by faith. When I study Romans, I'm going to be using it a ton. Basically, the entire book should probably be purple, but God is now declaring to men that all people everywhere should repent. So that's for all people And then orange is examples to follow. And I know that I use the same idea with a different color in my pens, but examples that I consider really, really important, I highlight. And then examples to follow that are, in Psalms or in other places that aren't so prominent and aren't so, they just don't stand out to me as much, I just underline in a different color. So that's what I use my highlighters for. I also use blue, and I use that for promises, like I am watching over my word to perform it, and the Lord will be an everlasting light, and he will be an everlasting light. Sometimes if you're in a prophecy section, you can see repeated promises, and when they're highlighted, it's a little bit easier. I also underline promises, so really the highlighting is just mainly for my own benefit, things that really stand out to me, that are important to me, that have a special meaning in my life, and that's what I use my highlighters for.